I got to tell you about my partner real quick. I got a partner I've been doing time with for over 30 years, and he was 19. He just got resentenced to 30 years. He's got 37 years in. And anyhow, he's here. He landed here yesterday. It was so crazy. It was the day before yesterday. And so he's got a good friend of his as an attorney, and she's been keeping us in contact with each other, what's going on with each other's stuff. And so on JPay. And so I get an email from her yesterday saying he's here. And I couldn't understand why he wasn't on the streets, but anyhow, I'm going to find out. The courts messed up. He'd done some time on a robbery prior to this murder, way back in the 80s, and he'd already served that time. But they're saying that he hadn't. So anyhow, he's still in. He's battling that, but that ain't the part I'm talking about. The part that really is cool is that he's, where Newport, okay, so Newport's up north of Spokane, okay, way up there. I think it's probably 40 miles, 50 miles from the Canadian border. Anyhow, he's got a ranch up there, and because he got a settlement from stuff that happened when he was a kid. He was in foster care. Remember I told you all of our stories are real similar, like they have a common thread of abandonment and addiction, and that's where he come from. And anyhow, he's got a freaking place up there, man. It's so funny because he's got a 30-acre pasture. He's got 40 acres total, and he's got nothing to put on him. He did hay last year. He's got a sister up there. They don't know nothing. And so when I told him what I was doing, he's just like, no way. And so long story short, man, we're going to truck some cattle up there and dump them on his pasture for him to help him keep that pasture down for the summer. And he wants to get involved with what I'm doing as far as the cattle company and the business goes.
Nice.
It's crazy, right? I mean,
yeah.
You never know, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he sounds like he's on a much better path as well.
Oh, for sure. Oh, he's got. You could Google it. Actually, his name is Art Longworth, and he's an author. He's written books and all kinds of stuff. I don't know nothing about none of that. It's not my my cup of tea. But yeah, he's a really smart, intelligent guy. Come from a really bad background.
Yeah.
And really, made himself. But yeah, he's an author. He's telling me he's really quiet and doesn't indulge a lot of information, especially something he doesn't know.
Right.
He's like that type of guy, almost like an introvert, almost.
Yeah. And what did you say his last name was?
Longworth. Longworth.
And is he native?
No, he's white.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Oh God, we've been doing time together. We met in the joint back years ago when we were both younger, and obviously not making the right decisions.
Right.
And that's how we met and had mutual respect as whatever convicts or whatever you're gonna call it back then.
Yeah.
And we just have known each other ever since, and run across each other here time to time. We've just done a lot of time together in different places. Yeah, he's a good guy, man. I'm just stoked how far he's come because he's a very tough dude. Like back when we were kids, man, he was tough. I mean, this guy could fight. I mean, he's gnarly fight. I mean, just right anyhow. So to see where he's at today and has been for many years now, I'm just totally impressed with his transformation. Totally impressed.
Nice.
I'm real proud of him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you guys are the exception, not the rule. And I love hearing that, there are more people that are heading down a better path so that when they do get released, they can live a much different life. Welcome to Reservation Redemption, the podcast based off the documentary with the same title. I'm your host, Brenda Fisher, and I'm a descendant of the Yakima tribe. In this episode, I'm speaking with Arthur Longworth. Arthur was incarcerated with Chief Rice for, a lot of years. He was incarcerated for 38 years, and they became friends. Chief is still incarcerated and has been for 35 years. Arthur has an amazing story to tell, one of which some of you out there might know firsthand or even had a family member deal with the same issues. I have learned so much on this journey and of things I had no idea that they existed, and the atrocities that children around this country have faced, not only Indigenous children that we're going to really dive into as we walk farther on our journey, but also non-Indigenous children that are completely forgot by the system or within the system. Nice to see you too. I know we've been chatting for a while, and we're finally doing this, so this is awesome. Of course, we're talking because you know Chief, and you spent some time with him on the inside. And so I want to hear a little bit about your story, because your story is very similar to Chief's story, and really interesting. Even when I looked up your picture from when you were 18, you guys look similar. Your hair was similar. It was kind of eerie that you went through the same types of things in your life. And so why don't you tell us about your childhood, because I know like a big piece of what we are finding out is that it does make a difference in how you're raised, how you're supported. And, if you don't have any type of support, guidance, someone to listen, it just seems like that is the first steps that we're seeing for kids who end up incarcerated.
Well, in regards to growing up, it's pretty simple. I didn't have parents, so that left it up to the state to raise me. And in this state, they historically just raised us in boys' homes. They had like a network of boys' homes all over the state, usually in the far rural reaches. And so I was raised in boys' homes till I was 16. And then back in those days, they pretty much just cut you loose on the streets.
Wow.
Yeah.
And no support, no way of like really making it or trying to be, assimilated to society at that point.
Well, that's a good point, right? There's no support on the way out of the boys' home, but that the groundwork was set in the boys' homes, right? There was no support in the boys' homes. They were like orphanages where you never saw a medical doctor.
Wow.
They hardly bought you any clothes. We didn't go to school. Mandatory work. Yeah, they did not send us to school. Last grade I went to was 7th grade. Never saw a doctor. So there was no support as a kid growing up. So it isn't a mystery why there was no support when they boot you out the door. But you're booted out the door with no education, no money, no support, no training, no role models. That was the reality of the situation. And so
they're setting you up for failure, basically.
There's truth to that, but I don't think it's conscious. It was just negligence.
Right.
And there was a whole lot of people that profited off that. They made us work every day. So these boys' homes were run by private organizations that got money from the state for allegedly taking care of us, but they gained their greatest profit from cutting every corner they possibly could, which meant just providing us with nothing. No one was overlooking that. These aren't just accusations I'm making. It's all part of the court record in this state. The state continually, generation after generation, pays out millions of dollars for their failures in their child raising institutions. So the things I'm saying they're provable in a court of law. The state admits to them. The state doesn't even fight these cases. It just settles them.
Absolutely. And that boys' home is giving out settlements because of the intense abuse and neglect that happened within them. And we're hearing a lot of other homes as well that Native American kids were forced into boarding school situations run by the Catholic Church, and they were extremely abused. And their parents were told they couldn't come and get them or they would go to jail. That just blows my mind. So, doing this research and working on this project, I'm learning so many things about what has, gone on and how kids are treated. And it's really scary. It's really scary. And then when you make a major mistake or do something horrible, oh, no, you just go to prison and, nobody takes into consideration the machine that built the monster. And, that's definitely something we want to shine a light on, to how you got there. How long were you incarcerated?
I was in prison 38 years.
38 years. And you were in for murder. And that you did that at 17, correct?
No, I was 19.
Oh, you were 19. Okay. So you were just a couple years older than he was
Yes.
when he fell. So you basically, though, kind of walked the same road. And at what point during your incarceration did you meet Chief?
Um, I'm a few years older than Chief.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been in like 4 or 5 years, but I was still young. I was still in my early 20s when I met Chief, and he's younger, so he must have been 18 or 19 when I met him. And
Wow.
and it's a small universe in there, even though there's thousands of people.
Yeah.
We all know each other. We all have the same weight on our back, pressing down on our chests, affecting our families or what we have of families, and we're in close proximity to each other. So even though there's thousands of people in prison, we're compacted into small spaces.
Right. So what was your experience when you met him? And it sounds like you guys became friends and stayed friends, even though you were moved around and weren't always in the same cell block. But it sounds like you always stayed connected.
That's true. That's true. And even when we weren't in the same prison, we would remain in contact. We've always remained in contact. But meeting Chief, it was just about when you're young in prison, you're either going to make it or you're not. And so, I saw a young person who was determined to make it and do the best he could. And that meant trying to cultivate something in prison. It didn't seem like he had much of before he came to prison, and that was a family. And that's what struck me about Chief. Always cobbling together as best he could a family, supporting them from prison, where you're literally making only pennies on for every hour of your work, sending that home, to his girl, and helping raise two kids who I got to know, who I loved. He had the cutest little girl, Alyssa. She grew up in the visiting room. That was important. That was always important to Chief. His family, it seemed to be to me, and I'm only looking at this second person, but the foundation he built his life on, and his ability to go forward. Because when you go in there young with that kind of sentence, you really need something more than yourself to care about,
Right.
because we can't care about ourselves enough to survive in there, right? That might not make sense to someone outside prison, but you need something bigger than yourself to care about if you're gonna make it something to live for. And I saw him building that in his beautiful family, who I still know and respect, and am in contact with. Yeah.
Nice. I know that you became a writer in prison, and the similarities between you and Chief. Your last year of education was 7th grade. His last year was 8th grade. And again, his situation was he didn't have support, wasn't doing well when he started freshman year, and apparently he dropped out because of it, and then just went to work. So that was a situation that he was in. So you basically kind of did what he did. You read a lot and you kind of educated yourself. And then you became a writer and you actually wrote a book. Can you tell us more about that?
The book was never meant to be published. The book was just a manuscript I wrote while we were in Walla Walla, and it's about the prison. And I felt necessary to write because I felt like as prisoners, we just got so mired in the misery of the situation. Everything seemed mundane.
Right.
And I wanted, so I wrote the book for my fellow prisoners. Everything's in the book is real. Every prisoner's in it is real. Every staff member, every incident is real. But by putting it in manuscript form, prisoners could look at it and say, no, this isn't mundane. This shouldn't be happening. This is messing us up, actually. So the manuscript floated around prison for like 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
The staff tried to get rid of it, right? They tried to find every copy they could and destroy it, but it survived until finally an English teacher, just a teacher from a community college, came into the prison and was teaching English when somebody gave him one of the manuscripts, and he took it out of the prison and took it to a publisher and was responsible for getting it published. And he later got kicked out of the prison because they accused him of smuggling out the manuscript, which is contraband, right? But
why?
They're very sour. The book is actually banned in Washington State prisons. The DOC banned it. Yeah, they're that angry about it. But what's that tell you? I mean, about what that book shows, right?
Yeah, obviously there's truth in there that they don't want to get out. It
is all truth, right? One of the hallmark incidents in the book is when a young black prisoner is shot and killed in the book by a guard. They don't like that because that is a real person. That was 21-year-old Abdul Ali, who got shot in the head and killed, and he didn't have that coming. Right? He did not have that coming.
That's awful.
It is awful. It's an awful
place.
Do
you know the circumstances, like why
I
did that?
I was there. I was there, and Abdul was a young prisoner, 21. He was only in for 2 years on a drug offense. Should never even have been in the worst prison in the state, right? 2 years on a drug offense. They sent him there. They put him in. They stuff us all in these 4-man cells that are overcrowded. They stuffed him in there with some older guys who were bullying him. So he felt the only way he could stick up for himself was to fight one of them, and to do it in a safe place, out in front of the guards. So he felt like fighting one of them out in front of the guards would be safe. So he hit the guy, and when he hit the guy, the guard shot him in the head and killed him. And the narrative from the guard in the prison was that it was necessary to protect the prisoner he attacked. I mean, how can we argue against that, right? But it wasn't right. It wasn't right.
Well, especially because he wasn't armed. And
wasn't armed.
You know, the guards can't get control of it.
Yeah, there's no explaining it. There's no excuse for it. But you're hostage to the system when you're inside. There's no one to call it into question. Right. The only story is the state story. Yeah. I don't mean to sound cynical and skeptical, but it's just the nature of that circumstance.
It just is what it is, and it's too bad. It is really too bad that things like that happen, and and it's not much difference out here either. That we were dealing with the same things happening and people being shot and that were unarmed, and it's a little scary. So especially when, it's authority. What are you going to do? You can only stand up so much or fight so much.
I think you guys are doing great. So I think you guys outside of prison are doing great. What I saw is a bunch of people taken to the streets saying enough.
Yeah,
you can't do that in prison.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're a captive audience, and there's nothing you can do. You can't go home after you protest. You are home.
What you can do is get taken to long-term solitary confinement, and you'll be broken, because I guarantee you they put you in a cell. You don't ever get out for at the very least a year, and maybe several years.
Oh my God.
That's the reality if you want to protest in prison, right? So it's a whole different situation and a whole lot harder to hold any account to the people over your life. It's part of the weight that's on your back and on your chest at all times. It's what Chief has faced every day of his life and is still facing today.
Yeah.
Those are the circumstances.
And you both had to grow up in prison and decide what type of men you were going to be, because you went in as kids. You absolutely went in as kids. You were not equipped for any of that. And, we hear constantly that they're saying that until about 22 to 25, The brain is not completely developed. So your impulse control and decision making is not there. And this is why we need good parents and people to supervise and, make sure you're making good decisions, and that you're not left to your own devices, because I don't think any kid is equipped. And who knows, what kind of mistakes I might have made if I didn't have strict parents that, paid attention to where I was at all times. And, when you're a kid, you're like, oh, my parents are so, awful because they don't let me do anything. And now it's like, I know why, because they don't want you to be in a situation where something goes wrong and it affects the rest of your life. So I totally get that. And you guys didn't have that. And you made a big mistake, had to grow up in prison, had to make your decisions on, what you were going to do. And to me, it's like, you became a writer, and Chief has become this amazing organizer and just this force of like positivity in helping others. And that's amazing, because I think you guys are more the exception and not the rule, for sure. And I know that he's talked about, really following his culture, and Francis Kaluuya, who came in and really turned the light on for him. And finally having that, I think that male role model that he never had, a positive male role model who showed him that, you can be a good man, or you can, live the prison life. You decide. And I think that was really amazing. And to watch that transformation of who he became, I'm really proud of him. And I think we talked about the fact that we grew up together, and I found our first grade class picture, and I was laughing because we both look ridiculous, but and just, he was always a super kind person. And so, I was shocked when we found out what, his circumstances were and what was happening. And he didn't have a lot of, family support. His dad never showed up for him, ever. I mean, this man, if I could speak to him, I would have some words as being a mother now. How he treated Chief and how Chief grew up, it was like he might as well have raised himself, because he pretty much did. And that's just sad. At his trial, at his sentencing, there were only 4 of us that spoke up. He had an aunt and uncle. He had Doris, who was the, mom of one of the kids we went to school with.
Doris,
and she's fabulous. And me, I was his only friend. And I had no idea that I was the only one that stood up for him back then. I guess I assumed there'd be more people. I assumed his dad would be there. And finding out later that almost no one showed up for him, he was on his own. And that's just, how it was from when we were little kids. And it just made me realize that, man, what a difference having, parents that cared versus parents that didn't. So, and in your case, no parents. So, how old were you when you were given up?
11.
11?
Yeah.
And so did you know both of your parents?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to refer to them as that, because they never played that role. So yeah, that isn't a reference I use. I don't really even know them.
Yeah. So do you know why they gave you up? Was it?
I have a couple sisters, and we've come to kind of consensus belief that it was just mental illness.
Okay. Do you know if that was chemically driven? Like, were there drugs involved, alcohol, anything that?
We were too young. We were too young to know really
what was happening. And were you have 2 sisters, so all 3 of you were given up?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And you went to a boys' home, and where did they go?
So, they went to different homes. They had a policy back in those days. They've changed it since. They often institute these harmful policies until they realize how harmful they actually are. And the policy back then was when they take family members from a family, they can't be placed with any other family members.
That seems ridiculous.
It's also very harmful, right? They separated
Yeah.
all of us, and that's what they did back in those days. They separated all of us, and they didn't place us with any extended family members because that would qualify as being placed with family members. So that's the way it was.
That makes no sense. And now
But
they
but
want you to go to family.
right. So they've
Yeah.
reversed that, maybe because they've recognized the harm, but they often don't. They institute policies like that in that system, and they often don't recognize the harm until the people that are subject to those harms grow up and are either express them negatively through a serious violent crime,
Right.
and they become aware, oh yeah, we screwed this person up, or it's voiced from a group of people. But at the same time, they were doing this to me, my white family, the
Mm-hmm.
Native Americans in the boys' home system were all being forbidden to see their relatives. They were all being forbidden to speak their language, whatever language that was. Yeah, under penalty of getting thrown in juvenile hall.
Wow.
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. So the kids that I saw, this was more than coincidence or happenstance. The kids that I saw who killed themselves the most in that boys' home system were the Native Americans. I'm not sure. I don't know why. They were facing often harder circumstances than us,
Right.
being forbidden from seeing their relatives or any relatives coming to see them. But more often than any other boys, they killed themselves.
Wow. And again, the more I learn about how kids are treated in the system, it just infuriates me that people do not take having kids as seriously as they should. I always say, I think people should have to have a license to have kids. They really need to take it seriously. And they don't. A lot of the time, kids are treated like an accessory. And, you know, I've heard quotes that it takes $300,000 to raise a child until they're 18. If people really thought about that, or, young people, it's like, really think about what you're doing, because bringing a child into this world, and if you can't take care of them and they go into foster care, it's a crapshoot if they're going to end up in a good family or a bad family, and how they're going to be treated. And they're going to be traumatized anyway because they've been, rejected by their family. And it just, especially with, I guess, this new, the Roe versus Wade, and they're talking about, overturning the federal part of it. It's like, guys, we're going in the wrong direction here. And I get the whole, pro-life thing, and, it's a human and all of that. But most of the pro-lifers, they scream that, but how many kids are they adopting and taking care of? It's like they like to talk the talk, but nobody wants to walk the walk. So that's, a huge issue. And that needs to change. And I don't know what we can do to, turn the light on for people. And, if they, if someone gets pregnant, it's like, make sure that you can, if you're going to have that kid, that kid's going to have a good quality of life, or just don't do it. I could get on my soapbox all day with this. But
Well, I like it. I like it. I mean, there's so much truth to that. And what you're talking about there, though, is affecting everyone from individual basis. I mean, we have serious societal, social issues where it would be better if we had better family structures. But in the absence of that, there is a way to address this with only a single entity, and that's the state. So when the state, takes over, we should be addressing, how kids are raised who are failed by their. So if parents are going to fail, which they are, we have a long history of failing kids as parents. How can we build a state system that works, that respects people's cultures, their families, backgrounds, that raises healthy kids?
right.
And we can do it. We can do it. But we're not doing it. And it's in the. I'm just struck by how much those people made in those boys' homes, right? They made a lot, but on the scale of how much is lost, it isn't even a comparison. So they made a lot from exploiting kids. We grew up and failed. Well, we failed before we grew up, and we have to be raised. We have to go through prison, years and years of prison.
Right.
You talked about a sum of $300,000 to raise a kid. Well, that's only a couple years in prison. You've already spent $300,000. So
Yep.
when you have to put people away for a lifetime because they failed as a kid, that's not even a comparison. So I guess I'm like you. I could get on my soapbox about that, but I think the state we really need to. Who is the state now?
Right.
As a kid being raised by the state, I used to think of the state as this faceless monster. I mean, that might sound
Yeah.
crazy, but they were in control of my life. But now, as an adult, I realize the state is really us people with responsibility, right? In this democratic society, we could change things if we stand up. So that's what I'm working to try to do, or at least do my part, so kids don't have to face what we did, me and Chief did as young people.
Absolutely. There needs to be more support for sure. And I think if they really talked about the number of kids that end up in foster care, that end up neglected, that end up abused, I think that number would be astronomical. And when you are breaking these kids down from day one, eventually, once that kid is completely broken, what do people think is going to happen? They're going to lash out. They're going to be angry. They're going to be, they're just not going to think right. And, and we're unleashing this on everybody. So I think that people need to be so much more aware of what is happening out there. And especially in some of the, like you said, the Caucasian kids got it bad, but the Native Americans got it so much worse to where they were committing suicide on a regular basis. And, that's really scary, that certain, groups are targeted and treated, and this has been going on, in our society for, going way back. And we're still trying to get to the point where, treat people with respect and, judge them by their character and stop thinking about, what do they look like? Who are their people? What is their culture? It's like, who cares? It does not matter. It's like so frustrating to me that, people still do that. And, and kids, I think we're all born, thinking that we, when we're little kids, we play with everybody and we're friends with everybody. And it's, I never saw differences really. Okay, you have a different culture. I don't care. You're, my friend. And my son, I raised him the same way. He had no idea that there were differences, that he just thought, some people had a better tan than he did. He had no clue. And we as a society, we need to think that way, and we need to help everybody. And maybe one day we'll get there. And I love that, you're trying to be an advocate for change, and that, you have an experience that not a lot of people that are now on the outside have had. And so with your experience, you can help educate, you can do so many things. You should do a TED Talk. That's what I think.
We'll ask Ted. We'll try to get Ted on board with that.
Yeah. The TED Talks are like so big, but yeah, at some point, because the word needs to get out. And, interviewing the people that I've interviewed, it has just opened my eyes and to a completely different understanding of what happens out there. And I think it's more of a socioeconomic thing than anything. I don't think it really has as much to do with race or culture, but more of a socioeconomic, people who, have parents that do well and work hard and teach you a work ethic, compared to, maybe somebody who's really poor and has to live off the system because they're not educated and they had kids young, and, but there are some amazing parents that, have had that situation and still have done really well. So it's not an excuse. And it doesn't mean that, people with more money are going to raise their kids better, because we know that's not true either. Monsters can come out of, anywhere. Some people are, born sociopaths, and then, some kids are just so broken that they make bad decisions and
so desperate, or so
yes,
desperate to survive.
yes, survival, exactly, survival mode, and just not thinking straight, or what the consequences might be, until after the action is done, and then you're so surprised at what you've done, and so ashamed, and so wishing you could take it back 100 times over. But you can't. Once it's done, and then you've got to face the consequences, and your consequences 38 years.
No, just right? to be clear, like, that was the end result, 38 years. But okay. No, they sentenced me to life without parole. I had the same sentence Chief has.
Okay.
And it was always that sentence all the way up until the time they released me. And they only released me because we have new members on the state Supreme Court who decided, in the line of thinking that you were expressed earlier, that right. young people just aren't as culpable,
right?
Because their brains are forming, and they're, especially those that come from adverse circumstances. So we have gracious Supreme Court justices who changed that, but I was not sentenced to 38 years. There is a big difference. Right?
Yeah.
I've known people that could get sentenced to 38 years, and you only do a third of that. I mean, right. 2/3 of it.
Right.
You always have that end goal in mind, so when you're getting out, and you can work towards that. It's a whole nother monster to be thrown in prison when you're young, right. and be told you're going to die there.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and that's where Chief still is.
Yeah.
Right? That's what he's facing.
And it's not, I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's the word fair, but it's not even how they have, I guess, decided how long people are going to be in prison. I just listened to a podcast about 2 little girls that were abducted, raped, and murdered. And 2 different guys completely. They thought it was going to be the same guy because it happened within such a short period of time and the same type of MO. But it was 2 different guys. This is the first and only time they'd done it. At least, they didn't have the DNA, but it was back in 1986. But these guys only got like 20 years. And, so they're going to be up for parole, like you said, and a third of that, maybe half, because it was, the circumstances of the little girls. But, how come a grown man who stalks a child and then, rapes and murders her, they only get 20 years? You murdered somebody, but it was an adult, or at least a teenager, somebody older.
Adult.
And you didn't have all the extenuating circumstances, of the little girls, but yet you got life without parole, and you were 19 years old. So why are they giving more time to kids than they're giving to grown-ass men? That's what I don't understand. It is not even. Same, and it was in Washington State. Same state as you guys.
And you could find 1,000 examples of that, and those examples are glaring when you're in prison with life without parole, and you've been there when you're young, because you're watching those people. Yeah. You're in there with them, and you're watching them leave. And I've watched them leave year after year, and there's many of them. But it has to do with the way our court system is set up. Who's better able to defend themselves in court? Who has the resources? Yep. A grown-ass man who's worked a while has some resources.
Yep.
A grown-ass man with family members has
family
resources.
And money. Yep.
He's also better able to decide and make deals with the prosecutor in the court, make plea bargains and deals. I'd be willing to bet, I'm not familiar with the particular cases you're talking about, but I'm willing to bet that there were deals made.
Oh, I'm sure.
And they could decide on them. It is really easy. It is really easy for the state to squash and step on and disregard a young person with no family or resources. And that's what happens in our system.
Yep. And it just seems so ass backwards to me. And it's like, still, it's like, yes, you committed a major offense, you guys are not discounting that at all. And I want to make sure that people know that, because I know how you felt and how ashamed you were and how, you wished you could have taken it back, just like Chief. To this day, he can't talk about it without getting completely emotional. He just can't even go there. And so we don't talk about it. It's a lot. And it's like, you guys are not monsters. You and Chief are not sociopaths. You will not reoffend. I think you guys will both do amazing things. And it's awful that you had to go to prison to become the men that you are and start your life now, really at the age that you are. But I think you both have a lot to offer. And I really hope at some point we can all join forces and help educate people and really open their eyes to what's happening out there and how they're culpable for building these monsters as well. And I think that people always think it's someone else's problem until it happens to their family. And no, this is all our problem, because, a kid growing up could make a major mistake and you could be the victim. And then you are involved at that point. But I just think people always think it's just not going to happen to them or not going to happen to someone they know or their family. And, Chief and I were the same age when it happened. And it was the most horrible thing in our entire community. And we were in a small community and they would not take the trial somewhere else. So he was under all that scrutiny from all the local people. And he was the most hated man in our entire valley. And, standing up for him was scary. It was very scary. I was still a kid too, but it was right after I graduated from high school. It was that summer that I had to testify on his behalf and trying to explain to people the guy I knew, was the sweetest guy. He was so well-spoken and everyone liked him. I don't know anyone who didn't like him, especially through 8th grade. And he was fun. And the fact that, he went in that downward spiral and got into drugs and had nobody, really looking out for him, except maybe Doris, because he would come to their house and he was friends with her son. And, when we were kids, and I know like everybody who really thought back and knew him, I'm sure they were surprised. Yes, he was, that kid that, was kind of not really wild, but, he had nobody really telling him to do anything, or giving him any guidance. So he was just on his own. So he was kind of the wild kid, that's what ended up happening. But now it's good to see the man that he has become. And I always tell people, that's why I stood up for him, because I knew who he was. And I knew he wasn't that monster. He just happened to be lost and make a major mistake.
And he wasn't, just to be clear, he wasn't alone, right? And that's one of the elements or dynamics that the Supreme Court talked about, even in the United States Supreme Court. Desperate kids together trying to survive become more dangerous, right? In a group. So
that's very true.
I just wanted to add that, right? He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. That wasn't all him.
Yeah, he wasn't alone. It wasn't something that was planned. It was just a bad decision one night, and his entire world changed. A lot of our worlds changed that day. And, someone else commented, when you go to prison, you take all your friends and family with you. So, I think anyone who cared about him was affected by it, whether they stood up for him or tried to bury it. Anybody that knew him, it affected them for sure. But tell me like a cool story about an experience that you had, with Chief being inside in the prison.
There's just so many of them. I'm not sure what to pick. I mean, we've lived our lives together.
Yeah.
And I already told you about, basically his kids being raised in the prison visiting room,
Mm-hmm.
and just being the sweethearts the of the visiting program.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, I was thinking back to, all the years and all the times I've seen him. But what struck me most is actually nowadays. I've just been out 3 weeks, and I
Mm-hmm.
was just up there with him, and it felt like coming full circle. Starting all these decades in prison together,
Yeah.
and it seemed more than just a twist of fate where we were together on the way out the door, and our families are connected. And I just made that commitment in my heart. Whatever it takes, we're going to get him out. Um, I, I don't deserve to be out here without, him coming out too, right?
Yeah.
How do I get this chance? And I was a couple years older when I killed someone as a young
Right.
person. How
Yep.
do I get this chance and leave him in there? I can't let that happen.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's where we're all striving, for that, to show, who he's become. And in the last 25 years, he's been such a force of being of service to other people. I'm just really hoping that the judge sees how many lives he's touched in such a positive way, and how many people on the inside that I call it his merry band of men that get together and make all these things that they send out to help families in need and tribal elders. And it's just such a cool story. And the fact that he did that just because it was the right thing to do. And seeing people appreciate the things that he does, and all of that, I think that has really been a huge force for him, and in lifting him up and helping him, carry on and continue and stay on the right path. And I think it's been really inspirational. So,
it has, but
uh,
there's anxieties in this, and the
yeah,
anxieties shouldn't. The anxieties I have anxieties about the politics, and it
mm-hmm.
shouldn't be about politics, because on the surface
Right,
our laws look like they're for everyone across the board. The 39 counties in Washington State,
mm-hmm.
the law is applied evenly to everyone across the county, but that isn't the case. So young people like me are being taken back to counties, are in the cities,
Mm-hmm.
in the Puget Sound area, the population capitals, Seattle, Everett, Tacoma, um, and being resentenced by judges who get it, who understand what the Supreme Court mandate is. My
Right,
anxiety is for the young people who were convicted in these rural counties,
mm-hmm.
that the judges don't get it and are in revolt to the state Supreme Court, which happens to be one of the counties chief is from, which worries me, which
Yes,
has a, a, a judge's bench that's predominantly almost all white, judges who've been around for forever, uh, attempting to administer to a largely Latino and Native American population. I'm worried about the politics.
yes,
But I don't know if I should say that, but I'm just going to say it.
yeah.
That's what worries me.
And it's true, because it happens, and people have their biases in it. He has to go back to a very conservative court and judge, and the people who changed the law in Washington State to reconsider parole for those who were incarcerated as kids. um, I'm sure they didn't come out of those areas. It came from somewhere else. So he's up against it. We all know that, and I think we're all praying and hoping that what he's done as a human being to help other people will be enough to show the judge that he's not going to reoffend. He's probably going to be a really great citizen. I think he's going to continue to help at-risk youth, and I think
No question.
you
No
guys
question.
teaming up and explaining this is how we got there. How can we stop this? How can we, make sure kids are given a chance to grow up as good and law-abiding adults? But it starts, when they're kids, and we can't just throw them to the wolves and then expect them to, grow up right or how we expect them to grow up. It just doesn't work that way. So anyway, so Art, thank you so much for, talking with us. And I'm really, really, really happy that, Chief has you as a friend. I think, you guys are both really great people, and, you might have, and you might have started out in a bad situation when you were younger, but you guys, pulled it out and turned into really great adults. And, and I know you want to pay it forward. And I know that, even though there are people who are like, well, your victims didn't get that chance, why should you? And it's like, well, it's not about vengeance. It's about if you can change and if you can do something to pay it forward and to maybe stop someone else from, walking in, the same path that you did to get to where you're at today and maybe make a better decision. I think people need to realize that there's some good that can really come out of this, and, start thinking about the fact that if you guys can rehabilitate yourselves because the prison system's not doing it, and you have that wherewithal and you've grown up to be people who make good decisions. So, that's all you can ask for. It's really all we can ask for at this point, because, having to grow up in prison, that can't be easy. It can't.
It was good to meet you finally.
Yeah, it's really good to meet you. And
this is kind of meeting you anyway.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Well, thanks, Art. I'm sure we'll be talking again, and really excited to read your book. I have it. I just have to read it now.
Oh, good. I hope you find some time. And that will inform the experience. Just so you know, that's where Chief was.
Right.
That's really cool. Thanks for telling me that.
Absolutely.
And whatever else I can do. So,
okay.
And when the sensing comes up, I really want to be there, right?
Yes.
I think it's all fine to say we hope the judge understands and finds that Chief has done these things and everything. But at the end of the day, our judges in Washington are elected; they're political officials. So if there's a whole bunch of people in the courtroom where he sees that he'll be held accountable, I think that might do it. Anyway.
Okay.
I appreciate you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you as well, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for tuning in, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when we upload our next episode. Check out our website at reservationredemption.com, and if you have any inquiries or want to discuss your native journey, send me an email at reservationredemption@untamedriver.com. Please definitely include any stories if you have missing members of your family. We definitely want to help. Follow us on Twitter, Res Podcast, so that's at REZPODCAST. Facebook, Res Redemption with REZ Redemption. And an IG, it's just Reservation Redemption. Thanks so much again for listening in, and we hope to have you hanging out with us next time.